Hey y'all, it's Ariel again. Um, Day 15 of this challenge. I'm trying to be quiet because I'm in my kitchen now, or my dining room now. I'm trying to be quiet. I would be in the library now, but I forgot to bring a chair because my chair is now in the bedroom, which I do not want to disturb my wife. So I'm here now, and you guys are now resting on a fruit platter with a pineapple behind you. So I hope you enjoy that. But today was good. Today was good. You know, started off a little rocky in terms of waking up. I woke up at around like 7:20. When I agreed with my chavrusa to meet at like 7 a.m. to like go over like the learning that we did this past week for our smicha program, to kind of just go over things that we're confused by and to kind of just like summarize like kind of the things that we've learned. I'm really enjoying learning for the smicha program, and I've been really enjoying the process of just like learning and learning and learning. And today was good. Today was good. Was able to get out of the house for a good chunk of the day, and was able to like interact with people in person, and that's always really great to to experience. And besides for kind of the rocky start of the day, I feel like I did some stuff which I'm really proud of, and I think I'm kind of like realizing that like I really am a lot of a perfectionist. When like right now I think the mind that I have to be in is like if I just do one good thing every day and build off of that. And what was the hard thing that I did today? I was able to study for my program for about, I'd say, like an hour and a half, just like no phone, no interruption, just me learning and writing notes and things like that. So being able to stay focused for that long was really great. I mean, maybe it's not something that's hard because maybe I was just in a state of hyper focus, which then the time just kind of goes by very quickly. So I'm trying to think what would be considered a difficult thing that I did today. I can't think of one. So I need to forgive myself, and give myself the credit that I do have, the things that I did work hard for, and say, good job with that. But I think that tomorrow I wanna ramp up a little bit some of the action taking, and not to be perfect. I have to keep reminding myself to not be perfect. That I don't have to be 100% of whatever I plan, because I typically plan things like every minute of the day, and like I plan that like I'm doing this and that and this and that and this and that. I have to be like like fine. I list these things out throughout the day, and like I might get one of those things done, and that's just kind of where I'm at right now. And obviously, for me, the dream and the goal for me is to be in a place where whatever I set out to do in a day, I do, with no exceptions, or very little to no exceptions. I know that right now I'm very far from that. And I think I have to accept that and say, I have to make marginal gains over time that are going to add up. And instead of just thinking that I'm just going to, change my life overnight, because I think life has taught me that it just doesn't really happen that way. Even the most abrupt changes, they happen over the course of days, weeks, years, right? You can't just, go from not being able to walk to running a 10K, So I think just kind of getting an audit of where I am, and recognizing that that's kind of the starting point. but I think I can kind of look forward to like being like, okay, like, if I'm knocking one thing off my to-do list every day, you know, what can I do to get up to two, right? Like, because going from one to two things is a really big difference. That's literally doubling, the amount of stuff you're getting done in a day. And I think starting with that. Overall, I think to talk a little bit about like the whole like no sugar thing, I'm feeling pretty good. Um, I think I was feeling pretty rough in the first week when it regards to like the no sugar thing. Now it's pretty good. And when I say no sugar, I'm like no like sucrose, also no artificial sweeteners, anything like that. Um, so like things like honey and like like freaking raisins or some shit like that. Like that's fine. If I'm eating fruit, and I've definitely been eating a lot more fruit, which has been noticeable, and I definitely feel a lot better when I eat fruit. When I'm eating, things that are, you know, designed to be eaten by humans, and more. And so, yeah. Um, People have been saying that they've noticed that I've been losing weight. I don't really see it. But, cool. I'm not really like, I think I want to lose weight more so for health reasons. I don't want to have sleep apnea anymore. I really want that to, when I've ever had two doctors be like, yeah, like if you lost like, 25 pounds, like you'd probably go away. And I'm like, that would be great because I don't like wearing my CPAP. I have it, I use it, I don't like it. And whenever I don't use it, I always feel like crap. And someone recently put on a comment like pointing out like, yeah, and like, you know what, he's probably right. Like I really need to view like using my CPAP is it's a genuine, like not using it is a genuine health risk, and that's not one that I can afford to take. And two, I think that the concept of not using it needs to be a goal that I set for myself, not a present reality. And kind of use that as like one of the motivators for me to like lose weight in a healthy and sustainable way, which I think right now with no sugar, with none of like the, I like to call kind of like, like the yucky sugar. And I was able to turn down like, like Coke. My wife got for me a Coke, and like, I would love to, make her happy to like, get something for me. But I also know that like right now that's not, I'm set on like doing what I say, and that value kind of stuck, and so I didn't drink it, and I'm kind of proud of myself for that. I'm proud of myself for that, for being able to stick to what it is that I believe in the moment, and despite really feeling tempted to give that up. And I think that this journey of kind of like, let me backtrack a little bit. I think the reason why I included the whole no sugar thing there was initially because, again, it was a form of easy, instant gratification that I wanted to get rid of. I wanted to put myself in a position, and that was kind of the whole idea of this challenge of like the kind of the no's, like the 5 no's that that I'm not doing, which I don't know if it's 4 or 5. No video games, no manga, no anime, no YouTube, and no sugar. So those 5 things. And that has been kind of, that's kind of how it started. But what I think the whole no sugar thing has kind of awakened in me is like, being able to have energy, regardless of, relying on things like caffeine and sugar. I mean, I'm not really much of a caffeine drinker anyways. I barely ever have caffeine because it just doesn't do anything to me. So if it really just tastes good, I think then I would have it. But regardless, yeah. But kind of this, new ventures, new kind of like sprouts of journeys are unfolding for themselves, like a weight loss journey. Because it was, losing weight was something that's always been on my mind. And it was something that I've had a non-linear relationship with, meaning that, when I was in high school, I was a wrestler. And when I was a wrestler, people who are wrestlers know this, and maybe people who know about wrestling or know people who wrestle, it's kind of like ballet for men in terms of like, the really extreme diets and like exercise habits that it can induce. And, things like fasting and, like crash dieting, things like that in order to make weight. And, I was on the keto diet for about 2.5 years. And I was so strict with it that like I wouldn't even have an apple because I was like, it has too much sugar in it. And lo and behold, nowadays I have like literally like I got my cholesterol levels are like slightly high, and I really do think that, big part of that is two things. One is, the keto diet. I really don't, again, it was recommended to me by my wrestling coach because it made me lose weight very quickly. I lost 15 kilos, 33 pounds in a month and a half when I first started the diet. And I started at cold turkey. I went from like and this is back when I was like 16 or 17. I went from weighing like 185 to like 158 or something like that. Or is it 188 to 155? I think that's 33. Yeah, 180 to 155. And, obviously I dropped a bunch of weight classes and I was able to kind of carry that, that muscle to like lower weight divisions, and that was able to help me. But like, it really did like kind of like ruin my relationship with food, because the whole concept was that I could eat as much as I wanted. Like that was I didn't have to care about calorie counts or anything like that. As long as I was just, eating these things and eating and drinking these things that were within this diet, I would just lose weight. And that's kind of what happened. Where what happened was, I would literally just like constantly like be drinking almond milk and like just eating like nuts and like, fish and meat and things like that. And of course, certain vegetables. And it really drove kind of this habit of like, I could really commit to my emotional eating with this diet, and that it was kind of an enabling force for that. This is not to blame anyone. This is not to, one, blaming just, a lot of times there's always nuance to things. And then two, like a lot of times blame is just not helpful. And so that's not really where I'm coming from, but where I'm coming from is kind of understanding, the trajectory of my relationship with food, which I think has kind of been awakened through this challenge, for me to examine and think about. And I've been realizing that like I eat, like when I'm actually hungry, I eat not that frequently, and like I don't really eat as much as I thought I would. Like I didn't realize how much YouTube and video games and things like that contributed towards my relationship with food. What I mean by that is that like, how often is it, and I don't know if you guys can relate to this, how often is it that you guys watch a YouTube video or play video games and you're just noshing mean like snacking, it's like a Yiddish term, just like noshing on something. you know, how for me it was every time, like I, I would accompany my eating with some form of stimulation, and that detracted from kind of like my ability to really be um, present in the act of eating. And I'm actually reading. I'm loving this book right now. It's called "B'yam Dalkecha," Derech Darche Avodah Lamaaseh. And for those who that have no idea what any of that means, it's basically a book of like, it's kind of a guidebook of like, kind of the lesser thought about ways of serving God. Meaning that like, from a Jewish perspective, a lot of times when we think of serving God, we're thinking through prayer, through the following the mitzvot of the Torah, the commandments of the Torah, following halacha, following Jewish law, and those things are all true. But there's some of the more intangible stuff, which is like, how can we view even the act of eating as a service? And it made me realize like, the process of eating can really be a lot more meaningful than I make it. And I didn't realize how much YouTube and video games and things like that were diluting my ability to have meaningful experiences in those quote unquote seemingly mundane activities. And that's a profound realization to come to, where now, because I'm a lot more aware of the process of eating, I get full a lot more quickly. I eat more slowly. And I'm kind of curious to see like where that journey takes me, because right now, like, besides the low sugar thing, I kind of eat, one, I cook all my own food because there's not really any kosher restaurants by me. So it's not really like a option for like eating restaurant food. So all the food that I eat either is like fruit and vegetables and stuff like that, or it's like I make it from scratch, or not really from scratch. I can buy like kosher tortilla chips, and like I made like for dinner tonight I made loaded nachos. Took some Beyond Beef and made a whole cheese sauce. So with like heavy whipping cream, and started with the roux and put cream in that, and then added like a ton of cheese. It was really, really good. I made my own pico from scratch. I've always been someone that has been very, devoted to cooking. Because again, I also grew up in a very foodie culture. Like the Moroccan culture in itself, is very much food oriented, very food centric. And if you add on top of that, like Jewish culture, so like Moroccan Jewish culture, Jews from Morocco, imagine that times 10. So, out of my mother's 8 siblings, 4 of them are caterers. Just to kind of put it into, into evidence of how of how prominent food is in our family. So, emotional eating has always been a thing that's kind of been ingrained in me. Eating is a social thing. Eating is an emotional thing. Eating makes me happy, and making food makes other people happy. So I don't really know where I was going with that, but the main thing is to kind of backtrack a little bit has been, I make all my own food, and so I'm not really too stringent with the way I eat right now, besides the whole no sugar thing. And I'm already seeing that I am losing weight, like on the scale, things like that. And I barely ever go on the scale because that's something that I had to kind of train myself out of, because when I was a wrestler, I would always be checking my weight, like compulsively. And it took me a long time to kind of heal from that. So now kind of like my relationship with the scale is like a little bit, strained, I would say. So I try to like avoid it if I can. But if I'm ever just like curious, I think now I can be able to like, be like, okay, I'm just gonna hop on the scale. And I'm not able, and think of now I'm not so emotionally impacted by the number on the scale. So, like I'm able to make like things like loaded nachos with like my own cheese sauce, and, it's obviously like, tons of calories, tons of fat, fine, and that's kind of where I'm at right now, and at least I'm making all my own food, and it's where I'm starting, and I'm eating more fruit. And from the time that there was a period of time where I was seeing a nutritionist, and I really want to get back on that, because that was back when I was living in a place that, things like that were very accessible, and I mean, I don't really have an excuse, I mean, these things are accessible to me. It's just, I have to actually put in the work to like get the resources, and what nutritionists have taught me, or like my experience with a nutritionist has taught me, is that like a lot of the the growth path for building a healthier relationship with food, with with how we eat, it really is a slow process, and really like slow and steady wins the race. I think just that's kind of taught me about everything in life, is that like everything I want, I grew up kind of just wanting everything now, 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 and if I didn't get it now, then I would just give up. And now I realize, no, I really have to recognize the small wins, and recognize that I'm to not get discouraged when I achieve 20% of my goal, right? Because guess what? That's still better than zero. And I'm gonna strive for for the next day to be 21%, 22%, and so on and so forth. And what life has taught me in my very short time here on this earth, after losing both my parents and everything else with my childhood and everything, um, which is a whole different story for another time. But it's taught me that even when while slow and steady wins the race, it really does pass by a lot quicker than you think, and it's in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that much time. Slow and steady could be a year of progress, and that year of progress in the grand scheme of your life is really like pretty quick, to really turn things around. And so there's kind of this duality where there's obviously these long-term ambitions, but like where it starts is today, it's the present day, being able to recognize today I'm only going to be able to accomplish 20% of what I set out to do, and learning to just be okay with that. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for me. That I'd say that's the biggest challenge, and the second biggest challenge is knowing what to title my YouTube videos, or like what to write in the descriptions. I never know what to put, but I try, and I don't know if you guys heard that. It's my dishwasher. It's singing to me, but with that, I think I'm gonna end this video. Before I go, I really do want to take time to appreciate and voice my appreciation for the comments that people leave. Likes, views, things like that, I don't really care about. I think that being able to interact with people via comments is like a really cool thing, because this is kind of like a digital journey of mine that, of course, I'm practicing in real life. And I really, I couldn't care less about likes. I don't really give a shit about likes, or views. Again, I don't, this is for me mostly about accountability. If it helps someone, that's nice. But I think what's really cool is when people leave comments and I'm able to actually converse with them, and and like pick people's brains apart, and learn about things that other people do, and hear other people's opinions, because I'm very open to other people's opinions, and I'm always considering them. And so don't be afraid. I am looking for. I'm always open to advice. I'm always open to learning, growing, things like that. So also being of help if I can in any way, meaning that if you guys relate to anything that I say, you can say, hey, I've been really struggling. It doesn't always have to be, hey, I've tried this and this and this and do that. That's great. But just because you see those comments, don't be discouraged. That if you yourself are struggling, that you can't voice that, and you really, I'm telling you, you can. You can absolutely voice that. You can voice your frustrations with your own journeys, and if anything that I'm talking about kind of strikes a chord with you, let me know. um I always want to know that I'm not alone, and I want other people to know that they're not alone as well. So if we can connect over that, that'd be great. What else? Another thing, something kind of related to what I talked about yesterday, is that when I was watching kind of these self help journey videos or whatever it is, I never really liked the term self help, because it always just reminds me of like an industry, or like a kind of like an industrial complex of books and programs and courses and this and that, and how all of it is just always just like a funnel for some product that will make someone money. And I never there was something always about that um, kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. This is coming from someone that interacted with it for many, many years. For a good chunk of my life, just interacting with it and, buying into it. So, with that, I want to say that, the whole process of watching videos, kind of either like this or adjacent to this, things that could be interpreted as other people striving to improve themselves, or people giving tips about self-improvement. I'm not here for that. I'm not here to give any tips or advice. I'm not qualified for that. I don't know if I'll ever be. I don't know how anyone is. And is that when I would watch these videos, I would I would gain gratification and feel like I'm progressing in my own life by seeing someone else progress in their lives, right? So it made me feel like I wasn't doing, it made me feel like I was, making progress when I wasn't putting in any work. And I think that what I really want to, premise, I don't really know what the right word is. I'm bad at words, but preface, yes. Well, what I want to preface kind of this whole thing with, even though it's the end of the video, so I'm prefacing at the end of the video, is don't fall into that trap, please, with my videos. I know, because I've fallen into that trap so many times, where don't try to don't watch my videos if you're using it as a form of gratification, or, and by that I mean like a form of making yourself feel like you're progressing when you feel like you're stagnant in your own life. Because I'm here to tell you firsthand, watching my videos won't help you in that regard. They won't. They might, at least in my opinion, I think they might help you if they feel like that you can relate to me in some way, or you feel like by you giving advice, you feel like you're helping someone, and that's and that's gratifying to you, and that's great, and I'm all for that. But yeah, to be like, don't use my journey as a proxy of your own, because that there's no fitting there's no fitting replacement for your journey. It's years and years alone, and just so this is mine alone. I'm just happening to record it, to keep myself on track, mainly. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to end off with. So with that, I really appreciate if you watch and leave a comment, so I can actually interact with you guys, instead of just feeling like I'm talking to a phone in front of a pineapple. As cool as that would be. There's also a peach there too, so in front of a peach and a pineapple. So with that, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Good day.